Hello again, fourth grade. This is Mrs. Bro with another lesson on decimals. Today, we're going to be adding fractions to the tenths and hundredths, and we're going to write our answers as a decimal or a fraction. Let's look at our problem of the day. Cameron measured 65 hundredths inches of rainwater on the first day of April. On the second day of April, he measured 83 hundredths inches of rainwater. How many inches of rain fell on the first 2 days of April? Read the problem again, and if you have it in front of you, you can annotate it, like me. If you don't, you can write down important information on your lined paper. Our question for today is how many inches of rain fell on the first 2 days of April? We have an amount for the first day, and we have an amount for the second day. And we know that our objective today is to add fractions. You can set up an addition equation using these fractions that might look something like this. 65 hundredths plus 83 hundredths is equal to, and we're going to say R to represent rain. We can label our equation. 65 hundredths is day 1, and 83 hundredths is day 2. And R represents total rain. It's important to label our equations so that we don't get lost and we know what each value or each variable represents. Now, we need to look and see if we can add these fractions. We know from our work with fractions in 3rd grade and also our work in 4th grade that when a fraction has the same denominator, we can add the numerators. So we can add 65 plus 83. Let's add those together. 5 plus 3 is 8. 6 plus 8 is 14. So when we add the numerators, we get 148. So R is equal to 148 hundredths. Are we done? That's right, we're not quite done yet. 148 hundredths represents a fraction that's greater than 1. Let's see if we can turn this fraction into a mixed number and maybe a decimal. Let's use a number bond. 148 hundredths. We can break that into 2 parts. And we can think about what we remember from expanded notation to do that. 148. We can break that up into 100 hundredths and 48 hundredths. 100 and 48 together make 148 hundredths. We know that anytime we see 100 hundredths, this is equal to 1 whole. What is it again? That's right. 100 hundredths is equal to 1 whole. Let's regroup those. So now we have 1 and 48 hundredths. So 1 and 48 hundredths is our mixed number. Today's objective says we can write it as a decimal or a fraction. So we can keep it like this, 1 and 48 hundredths, or we can write it in decimal form. The total rain was 1 and 48 hundredths, or 1 and 48 hundredths inches. Not too bad. We just need to remember that whenever we have a fraction greater than 1, we need to pull out the whole. We need to regroup to make our whole. In this case, our whole is 100 hundredths. So we have 1 whole and 48 hundredths. Here's our mixed number. Here's our decimal. Let's look at one more problem. Look at your try one more. What is the sum of 8 tenths and 57 hundredths? Express the sum as a decimal. In this problem, we need to put our answer in decimal form, not fraction form. So we can't forget that last step. In this problem, once again, we're looking for the sum. That means we're going to add. Let's write our problem. Does that look right to you? Look at what we did up here. Do you see it? There it is. We're trying to add 8 tenths and 57 hundredths. And we remember from our work in adding fractions before that in order to add fractions, our decimals need, not our decimals, our denominators need to be the same. We have tenths and hundredths. We can turn these 8 tenths into an equivalent fraction using hundredths. 8 tenths times a value is going to give us how many hundredths? We have to think about 10 times what number gives us 100. Do you have it? That's right, it's 10. 10 times 10 is 100. Whenever we multiply to find an equivalent fraction, we have to multiply by the same in our numerator and denominator, because this fraction we're multiplying essentially has to equal 1. So if we're multiplying by 10 in the denominator, we also have to multiply by 10 in the numerator. 10 times 10 is 100. 8 times 10 is, you got it, it's 80. So now 8 tenths is equal to 80 hundredths. Let's rewrite our equation. Does that look better? Sure does. Our denominators are the same. So our sum will also have the same denominator. We can add the numerators, 80 plus 57. 0 plus 7 is 7. 8 plus 5 is 13. So we have 137 hundredths. Are we done? Not quite yet. Don't get tricked. We need to present our answer as a decimal. Right now, we have a fraction greater than 1. Let's use our number bond to see if we can pull out the wholes. 137 hundredths. I can break that into 2 parts. 100 hundredths and 37 hundredths. Whenever I see a fraction that is the same in the numerator and denominator, that fraction can be regrouped as 1 whole. 100 hundredths is 1 whole. So now I have 1 and 37 hundredths. Can you write that in decimal form? That's right. 1 and 37 hundredths. Go ahead and box that in so you can find your answer and don't get tricked again. You just added fractions with different denominators, and you added fractions in the hundredths. You also regrouped to make a mixed number or a decimal mixed number with a value in the ones place. Excellent work. What do we need to think about when completing today's work? Today, we need to remember that when we add fractions, they must have the same sized pieces. Remember, our denominator tells us the size of the pieces. So when we add fractions, they must have the same size pieces. Tenths, add to tenths, hundredths, add to hundredths. That means they must have the same denominators. This will be very important when dealing with adding fractions with two different denominators. Don't forget, when making an equivalent fraction, whatever is multiplied by the denominator also has to be multiplied by the numerator. Pay attention today when it says to express your sums either as decimal or fraction. And don't forget to regroup if you see a fraction greater than 1. You may do your practice problems today on this packet if you have it printed, or on your lined paper. Your exit ticket will be a Google Doc that you can submit directly to your teacher. If you need help, please visit your teacher during office hours. I look forward to seeing you.